that the next gen seems to be reacting negatively to our 19th century learning teaching model. So the learning by doing model is really a great way to sort of allow students to really engage with the content and apply so that you can increase the retention from something like 5% up to maybe 75%. And obviously, if you're able to allow them to use simulations in your VLU so that they can apply it in a pretty realistic fashion, then obviously, hopefully, you can get even higher retention than that. So what we found in the college side was that instructors needed at least virtual learning objects so that they could insert into more traditional course delivery methods. First step is just to make sure you're aligning with the standards and objectives. And I mean, this sounds really rudimentary, and it probably is for you, but it's ironic that I've found a lot of educators get really excited about technology. I'm just kind of counting all the iPads I'm seeing as I'm walking around. So we're educators, we get really excited about these innovations, but what happens is that we might hire on, and I know there's a lot of game companies who have gotten into the e-learning space. They're developing really cool, engaging experiences, but they don't necessarily teach anything. So how do we make sure? So I think from an instructional design standpoint, an instructional technology standpoint, I think it's really important that we identify right up front what are going to be the specific standards and outcomes that we want to get from this VLO that we're going to be creating. And I think that's going to help you choose which areas you want to include a VLO for. Because if you can get very granular on the types of learning that you're going to do, I think your outcomes will be better. So I think there's the temptation to throw everything into this. Wouldn't it be cool if we had all these different things? So if you can be very specific with a virtual learning object, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about and are probably using modularized learning. So trying to get this as granular as we can, I think that helps with outcomes as well. Once you create the VLO, then you want to create a design document. So one thing that's interesting that we're going to sort of inject into this model today is gameplay as well. Because one thing that we thought could really increase outcomes, and I think the research is showing that, is the ability to use game to engage the learner within a VLO. So now what that allows you to do is to combine and sort of dovetail the instructional design into a game design. But I think that's really helpful because a lot of the best educators you know nothing about building games, and then a lot of really good gaming companies know nothing about education. So that design document up front is really important. Next thing is storyboarding the content. And that's going to help, I think, you, if you're managing a team of people who are developing a virtual learning object, sort of assess along the way. Another really important thing is to pilot test. I'm a really big fan of if you storyboard in PowerPoint, perhaps you can build a rough prototype and pilot test it. Because sometimes you'll discover the most ironic things. They need to be able to log in here, or they need to be able to. So sometimes the storyboard process can identify that. And then also it's to revise and deploy. One of our best practices is when you're building VLOs, how can you define what's going to change pretty often? What can you allow maybe your professors or your teachers to be able to change themselves? What are some ways that you can repurpose that VLO for other instances? So we'll talk about those as well. But it allows you to revise that continually without going back to a vendor and having to spend more money. So what I wanted to do was kind of to demonstrate a VLO concept was just to show some demonstrations today. And this is the Virtual Globe Theater that we did for Florida Virtual School. This does align with the state and the national standards for English 1 and English 4 at the high school level. We wanted to make sure it's got to start with that because you've really got to know what are you building towards. And what we did was create individual missions that were individual VLOs. Now the benefit of this was we were able to create, and this happens to be a Yi Virtual Globe, to teach the Globe Theater. You should launch this.
Hi, lo, hello. Much thanks to all today so noted arrived in timely fashion. Now, were it not known, my name is said as one, William Shakespeare.
Basically, this is designed for high school kids. We wanted to have a gameplay involved, but it had to be pretty inexpensive. So you notice we used sort of this Yab-Yum idea for the William Shakespeare character. It allowed us to produce very inexpensively. Basically, the idea is that Shakespeare is giving you a series of riddles that you need to solve, and as you solve those riddles, you'll move up in your level, And the goal of the game, of this VLO, is to become the next stagehand for the Globe Theater. And basically what we're teaching is we're teaching Elizabethan theater, we're teaching the Globe Theater architecture, and the way we're doing that is that they have to solve these clues. So if I take a look before the entrance. So now what the player will do is basically can free play around this VLO to actually identify. Now along the way there are clues written, and all of this text area is all written in XML, and this is all flash driven, so it allows the instructional designers to kind of modify the content themselves. So I think that's important from your perspective, is when you have someone design and build a VLO, make sure that you build it so that you can maintain it in-house. So within this content, there are clues as to how, what the answer of this riddle is. So if I go through, I can actually just do some exploration learning and I can find out. And then once I think I know what it is, I think I do. So then in this particular mission, I actually clean that area.
Correct! High-low, the falconers cry. High-low, to keen wit before mine eye.
And basically, now I've moved up in standings. So once I complete enough of these riddles, then basically I've moved up and I have now moved on to the next level. It's kind of neat too, because you've got to build in fun to fail. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm sure this is not the answer, but I'm just going to... Some silly little things we did was we basically built in a little random generator to actually yell at the player and stuff. So it was pretty interesting. And the player can sort of go anywhere they want to go. And I think that's nice because learners want some free play. The different missions aligned with different objectives. So in the first mission, it's learning about the Globe Theater. The second mission was learning about how were plays cast and that sort of thing. So simple challenges along the way allow you to make some changes as you're going as well. Another project that we did was the frog dissection. And I know in a lot of cases for online, in this particular instance, an online student can't do a frog dissection. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of do that online. So this was an element that was created in Flash. So it's also created in 3D. This is done in what's called ChromaDepth 3D. So the benefit is that you don't need any special monitors or any kind of computer system like we're looking at now can play it. But it comes with the little paper glasses. So when you put the glasses on, there's a sense of depth and dimension. So I'm just going to jump through here. There's a quick quiz at the beginning so that the learner can kind of learn before they start to play. So the concept of the gameplay for this virtual learning object is you have to earn the instruments that you're going to use to dissect the frog. I know the answer because I've learned from playing. So I've earned all of my tools, and now I get to enter the lab. Now the first step I need to do, it's walking me through step by step. I need to prepare myself. So if I go through here, I need to pick my tools. I don't think it's going to be the bread. I don't think it's going to be the fire extinguisher. I think it's going to be the gloves. So again, it's a little bit of that fun. It just makes people smile. When they're having a good time, they're learning. So now I've got my gloves on, and now the next thing I need to do is walk through and enter the pins. So I want to get in here and just open up the guts so everybody can see how nasty this looks. Now I can cut them open. And at the end, there's going to be a quiz, so you'd actually navigate through the frog to be able to identify different areas of the frog anatomy. It's a very simple game. It doesn't take that long to produce or to create or to finish, but it really does align with those learning objectives. It was very clear what needed to be completed. And by adding the 3D effect, it made it really engaging. This is a project that was done for the North Carolina Community College. It's called BioNet, and it supports their technical training. There's a storyline behind this one as well. And the storyline is that you've been the new lab assistant to this lab. And so what you'll need to do is complete these steps to prove that you've earned the job. So I've got a score that I'm going. I've got my max score that I can earn for this level. And then I can find out how well I'm doing on each station. And this is all being tracked as well. For the learner, what's nice is that they can actually browse through any of the different stations along. So I'm just going to stick with Station 1, but it does provide some free play. And again, this is just menuing is what it is, but it's more of a sort of an experiential or immersive style of menuing. So we're going to go in here and kind of take a look at these questions, which causes contamination. Okay, and now I can actually assign what we think are the 3. And I'm getting feedback along the way. I can try again, and it's going to leave the ones that I got correct. So as I'm moving my way through, now I can get up into doing more and more advanced simulation. So in this case, I'm going to be 3 most common areas to sample. And again, all of these are aligning directly with the learning objectives for this module. So basically, this VLO allows you to sort of go through, and now we're going to actually start doing some simulation in the clean room environment. So again, you can tell that the level of, you've got some knowledge-based, with the Globe Theatre example, we kind of went through and said, okay, here's some information about medieval England and theater. And so we went all the way up to more skills-based VLOs in this particular example, when we're actually doing some simulation. And in this particular example, I won't walk through the whole thing, but you're walking through the procedure. And then it ultimately culminates in an exercise where you'd have to complete an entire procedure by just following the steps. So again, very much skills-based. So again, just to recap on what we were talking about before about the design, aligning with the standards and objectives, it's a really good idea. I've heard a few of you, I've been talking to some folks during the conference, and they've been talking about the fact that there are a lot of really cool, pretty pictures, so to speak, that are being created. But when it gets down to pedagogical value, instructional design, there's just really not there. So I would encourage you to start with those standards and objectives and the learning outcomes that you want to get to choose your VLOs. Some VLOs, you might choose it and say, you know what, it's too expensive to do an elaborate simulation to be able to do this online. So you might not want to use that one, but you might want to inject it somewhere else. The design document, again, if you can include some game features as well as instructional design features, that will allow you to create even more engagement. A great way to increase engagement would be competition, so that players can see what other students are doing, what their scores are, how well they're doing. Maybe you can have it submit directly to the teacher's email address, for example. Just ways that they can get credit, so to speak. Pilot and test, again, if you're going to build a VLO with audio and really cool sound design, and guess what? You're going to put those in a computer lab that's on campus that's very loud, or that you can't have the sound up. It's kind of a waste of time. So again, consider these things if you can, where you're going to be applying those. If you're integrating it into a course, really important, make sure that you know what outcomes your instructors want to capture, and that the developer or whoever's building the VLO is capturing and writing that data to where it needs to be found. So that's really important. If the content is prone to change, the Shakespeare game, the Frog game, a lot of that content is driven through XML files. It's great because it allows you, if there's a change to a textbook, there's a new edition that comes out, you've got to change all your page numbers or all your references. You can just change it once in those text files and your Flash app is updated. So try to anticipate. So what my recommendation would be to create very small modularized VLOs that are really designed to reinforce a very limited set of learning objectives, knowledge objectives and skills objectives. But don't try to do too many things in one VLO. Instead, maybe create an overarching framework and then have the developer or have your team design instances or missions or individual ways to create other versions of it or smaller versions. I think that's just going to really help out in being able to reuse these. Another great tip might be to have the developer create it so that you can create it for other courses, or you can share those resources, because it does take a little bit of time and effort to create a VLO, so it'd be nice if you could amortize that out over time. And finally, it's capturing the evaluation. It's great if you have a VLO, but if you're not tracking it, and that's when it goes back to tracking it back to an LMS, for example, you can really see the value in the outcomes. When you compare teachers who use that VLO, teachers who don't use that VLO, you can start to track right back and assess how well that VLO is really being of use.